Good afternoon and welcome to the Family Research Council Lecture Series. My name is Irina Grosu and I am the Director of the Center for Human Dignity here at FRC. Today's lecture is titled, Rescuing Mothers and Children from Abortion Using Technology and Data. Each year, there are approximately 1.4 million pregnant women in the U.S. who are abortion-minded. Most of them are unreached and underserved, apart from the abortion industry. Finding them, communicating with them, serving them, and caring for them long-term is essential to the increasingly successful effort to make abortion no longer sought, and even more, unthinkable. Human Coalition President Brian Fisher will share insights, research, and startling conclusions from Human Coalition's innovation team based on their work with abortion-determined population over the last 5 years. Using data analytics, testing and optimization techniques, and a nonprofit framework built on business principles, Human Coalition is answering some vital questions necessary to ending abortion. Why do women really seek abortions? How do we serve them properly so that they choose life? How many are coerced? How involved are churches in promoting a culture of life and helping hurting women who are post-abortive? Can we really end abortion? Brian Fisher is an author, speaker, business leader, and co-founder of Human Coalition. After years of serving in executive management in the for-profit and nonprofit industries. Originally piloted in 2007, Human Coalition invented and applies abortion-ending strategies that fuse technology, best practices, and tangible help to compassionately serve the unreached abortion-determined woman. Brian is a certified financial planner and the author of 4 books, including the new release, Abortion, the Ultimate Exploitation of Women, and he has written numerous articles. His columns have appeared on FoxNews.com, The Washington Post, Independent Journal Review, and CBN.com. Brian and his wife, Jessica, have 2 sons. Please help me welcome Brian Fisher.
Appreciate it. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here today, and thanks to all of you online for tuning in as well. I am deeply grateful to FRC for the invitation to come out here today. I have been traveling a fair amount over the last several months, and it's beginning to take its toll. I was in Oklahoma City several months ago, and in a rush to pack, thought I had packed Colgate and didn't read the tube properly. I had packed cortisone cream. Have any of you ever tried to brush your teeth with cortisone cream? It works remarkably well. It just doesn't have the same minty taste. So far here in D.C., I've not experienced any major faux pas, but the trip is still young. I first met Tony, actually, probably 11 years ago. I was serving Coral Ridge Ministries in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and my first exposure to Family Research Council was over a decade ago when we partnered together on a hate crimes video project and co-released it, so that was a lot of fun. So I had a deep love and respect for Family Research Council, and I know many of you others are representing other groups here today, so thanks again for coming. I'm going to talk about a very interesting journey of my own that God has brought me through and how that translates into using technology to rescue children from abortion. I often joke that Human Coalition is one of the larger pro-life groups in the country that no one has ever heard of, because we have been growing very quietly and have not been engaging much in the political scene or in the legislative scene. We have been on the ground, and that will become more evident as I walk through a few slides. A few notes about me, just so you understand who's addressing you today. I was born in eastern Pennsylvania, in the Philly area, raised in Erie, Pennsylvania, and then met my beautiful wife of almost 22 years in Pittsburgh. And so we lived in Pittsburgh for many years, and so most of my upbringing and early life was up here in the Northeast, and then we moved to Florida in '06, and then finally to Dallas in 2008, where we've been ever since. So I do bring you greetings from the Sovereign Republic of Texas. That is how we think of ourselves there, and we love that state, and we certainly love Dallas. I was a music major. I went to a small liberal arts school in western Pennsylvania called Westminster College. I studied classical piano, and when I got out of school, I recognized that musical talent and musical employment were not necessarily related. So I had to go find a job. I ended up at Christian Radio. I worked for Word FM in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Christian Radio was a phenomenal start to my career, but discovered that the pay in Christian Radio was about the same as unemployment. So at some point, I had to go get a real job, and ended up being recruited into the securities world. So my background is primarily in stocks and bonds and in the investment world. And as Irina nicely mentioned, a certified financial planner. In 2006, through a radical story, which I don't have time to share, I was recruited to go run Coral Ridge Ministries in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I was there for 2 years, and then was the COO of a marketing agency in the Dallas area before coming on to Human Coalition full-time. In 2007, while at Coral Ridge in Fort Lauderdale, we began to test the idea of using high-end internet marketing to reach women who were going online looking for abortion providers, to see if we could intervene while they were searching for abortion providers and give them the option to connect with a local pro-life pregnancy center instead. In 2007, this was rather infant application of that technology, and so we formed relationships with a few pregnancy centers in 2007 and basically did what's called geo-targeting search engine marketing, which is identifying searchers for certain terms within about a 10-mile, 15-mile radius of the pregnancy center. And the idea was, could we in essence become a lead generation service for pregnancy centers, of which there's roughly 2,500 across the country. And during that time, we learned a lot. One, there was an enormous universe of people searching for abortion procurement terms online. 1.85 million times a month, somebody searches for an abortion procurement term, meaning abortion clinic DC, abortion clinic Dallas, RU486, abortion with a coat hanger. All sorts of terms like that are being searched 1.85 million times a month. So that to us was an enormous mission field. And we began to test different ways of using both paid and unpaid marketing to reach those women and invite them to come into a pregnancy center. And the test worked. That's 10 years ago now. But the test did show that we could, in fact, get our message in front of those women who are abortion seekers and bring them into a system of care. In 2008, we moved to Dallas, and I was back in the for-profit world. I was excited to be there, but God had other plans and systematically dragged me back into the pro-life movement. I was an unwilling participant at that point, but in 2009, I started Human Coalition, formerly known as Online for Life, as a nonprofit. And in 2012, we converted from a volunteer organization to a full-time organization. 3 businessmen left their careers, myself and 2 other gentlemen, and started Human Coalition as a full-time group. We have about 115 paid employees today in 7 states, and I'll explain a little bit of our business model as we walk through the slides, but the journey has been miraculous. A lot of fun, and some very interesting moments as we have tackled what I think is the greatest Holocaust in American history, which is the wanton killing of almost 60 million children in the womb since 1973. So I'll briefly walk you through the methodology, and I hope some of these case studies are informative for your work and the groups that you work for, both here and online. And this formula describes how to end abortion in a specific city. Now, I want to disclaim that I know I'm in Washington, D.C., and we're all about legislation and policy here. I'm going to ask you to separate yourself from that world for just a few minutes, and we're going to talk really about the vulnerable population of abortion-determined women in this country and how to reach them directly. So this formula, this heuristic, is not intended to convey legislation. It's intended to convey how do we reach and serve vulnerable populations in order to eradicate abortion systematically, city by city. There are 4 parts to this. We're only going to have time to go through 2 of them today. We'll go through the first 2, and I'll describe them briefly. But this is what's called a heuristic. It is a non-mathematical formula to describe a strategy. And in brief, what this formula says is, if we reach enough abortion-determined women, market penetration, and we become adept enough at rescuing children, effective rate, and we deepen our engagement with the local church in order to get them to be a force to be reckoned with in the protection of preborn children and their families, church engagement, and we methodically work to remove abortion providers from specific areas, abortion providers themselves, we in fact can create abortion-free cities. You get the first three numbers high enough, you get the last number to 0, game over. You have created an abortion-free city. Does that make sense? So church engagement and the abortion providers themselves will leave for another day. I will focus my comments on market penetration and effective rate. And to articulate how that occurs, I'm going to show you what we call as the coalition wheel. This is how Human Coalition is organized. We operate according to the formula I just showed you through the divisions of the 6 phases of the coalition wheel. And again, we won't have time to go through all of them. We'll spend most of our time on the first 3, the first one being the actual marketing outreach to this population of abortion-determined women. Human Coalition has created segments to describe the population of total pregnant women in this country. There's lots of definitions floating around in the industry, and they're all helpful. We did invent our own to be able to standardize it for our own purposes, and so the first category is what we call planning to abort or abortion-determined. There are roughly 1.2 to 1.4 million abortion-determined women in the country annually. Obviously, the subset of that, around 1 million abortions a year. The undecideds is the next category. Those are women who are typically legitimately on the fence, and then you have planning to carry. Human Coalition's mission is focused on that first category, planning to abort, and they are primarily an unreached, underserved population group by everybody but the abortion industry. Now let me clarify those comments, because we serve the pregnancy center movement. We serve 35 of the best pregnancy centers across the country. We own 7 of our own clinics. They're not pregnancy centers, they're women's care clinics, but we have a deep love and affection for the pregnancy center movement, and we want to see it continue to be successful. While I say that, I must also say that the data clearly shows that the pregnancy center movement struggles to reach the abortion-determined client, primarily for budgetary reasons. The abortion-determined woman will not walk into a pregnancy center voluntarily. They must be outreached to and found and brought into a system of care. The reason is because they don't want to go to a place that won't offer them an abortion. Does that make sense? They want to go to a place that is going to offer them an abortion. And most pregnancy centers, quite frankly, do not have the budgets and the marketing horses to be able to design the strategies to reach into the abortion-determined marketplace. So while pregnancy centers see a large number of clients, most of them are in the undecided and in the likely to carry category. There is nothing inherently bad or critical about that statement. Those women also need to be served. My point is that we must also recognize that the abortion-determined woman is unreached and needs to be captured into a pro-life system of care. We didn't discover this until about 2012, and since then that is where we have spent our time. So the abortion-determined or planning to abort woman is really a fascinating group. Again, about 1.2 to 1.4 million of them in the country every year. This is where we spend the vast majority of our time. This is what an abortion-determined and abortion-seeking woman looks like according to Human Coalition's statistics compared to Guttmacher. Guttmacher, of course, is the pro-abortion research institute that was formerly very affiliated with Planned Parenthood. I would argue still very affiliated with Planned Parenthood. But the abortion-determined client is very similar in both categories. This is an interesting slide. The one thing that Guttmacher doesn't provide that we do is marital statistics. To no surprise, 74% of the abortion-determined population is single. These women, by and large, have been neglected and abandoned by the father of the baby, and in the cases of a marriage situation, the husband oftentimes is the person coercing the wife to abort their child. A stat that doesn't show up on here, but the majority of Human Coalition's clients are mothers. They have other children. The modern perspective of the typical abortion client being a 17-year-old high school girl is really not accurate any longer. The average Human Coalition client is in her 20s, around 24 years of age. Again, she already has children, and in many cases is either a young professional or a student or in the workforce somewhere, or in many cases was part of a relationship and has been abandoned and really has very little means and the ability to sustain herself. So again, this is Human Coalition's sample compared to Guttmacher's sample in terms of the reasons why an abortion-determined woman wants to abort. The primary issues are financial and relational. That is not something new. We've known that for years. What is interesting is some of the nuances in some of that data. I don't have time to go through all of it today, but keep in mind Planned Parenthood is a $1.2 billion abortion behemoth, has very substantial resources, and their marketing is unparalleled. They have a tremendous brand in their space and have infiltrated the public school system, many churches and communities, and are able to garner a very large market share, as you all know, of the abortion-seeking population. So that is who we are targeting and who we are working with. Let's talk about how that happens. The marketing piece is, of course, how Human Coalition got its start, and we built a statistic called market penetration. Very simple. For every 100 abortion-seeking women in a community, how many of them have a legitimate conversation with some sort of pro-life agency? Meaning, how effective are we as a movement at legitimately reaching and persuading an abortion-determined woman to have a conversation with us? I don't know if this is interactive or not, but does anybody have a guess as to what the average market penetration is into the abortion-seeking community in most major cities across America? Am I allowed to ask questions of the audience? Okay, good. Anybody have a guess? 1%? Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, between 1% and 3%. Excellent. Yeah, we are normally going to say 3% because 1% sounds really unfortunate, but 3% market penetration is where we typically estimate market penetration is. So think about that. For every 100 women in a community who are seeking an abortion, only 3 of them talk to anybody in the pro-life movement from that population. This is an urgent need in the pro-life movement if we are going to end abortion. Frankly, we have to reach more of the hurting, vulnerable population in order to do this work. Some of the things that we have tested to be able to do that are online. Most of our work in reaching the abortion-determined population is through internet marketing. And what we have discovered over the last 5 or 6 years is you can make tremendous gains in market penetration by testing and optimizing internet marketing services that reach the abortion-determined population. A very simple example. A woman in Raleigh, North Carolina goes online, searches for an abortion clinic Raleigh. She is presented with a series of ads and is presented with a series of organic links. How many of you have ever searched for anything online? Okay, 4 of you. Whenever you search, you are typically presented with paid ads and non-paid links, correct? Okay, there are internet techniques, which many of you are familiar with in your arenas, at reaching those women, and they are constantly being tested and optimized. And the technology game is always changing, so this is a very vibrant environment. But we ran a test in Raleigh, where we own a women's care clinic, and we began to just deal with some of the nomenclature of that area. If you're familiar with Raleigh, if you live there, you don't often refer to yourself as being from Raleigh. You say you're from the Triangle, Raleigh, Chapel Hill, Durham, Triangle. And so we switched out that one word in our ad copy from Raleigh to Triangle, and we saw a 29% lift in clicks, which meant an increase in calls, which meant an increase in saved babies, just from testing and optimizing those ads. We are testing and optimizing all the time because the game is always changing and because the technology is always changing. Our internet marketing department, which is our oldest department, has gotten very savvy at increasing marketing penetration through these methods. This is one particular chart that I thought you would find of interest. This showed about a 36% increase in qualified calls. We want those clicks to turn into calls from abortion-determined clients, and we saw an increase of about 36% from quarter 1 of 2015 to quarter 1 of 2016. And you can see the quantum leap there, which was in the latter half of 14 to 15. What caused that leap was a number of tests that we ran in the internet department trying to figure out how to serve the abortion-seeking women better. There were 2 major pieces here. One is we converted our strategy from a microsite strategy to a landing page strategy, meaning we used to use, back in the day, we used to use very large informative sites that didn't work well, and so we converted to very short one-page sites with very little information. And then as the audiences and internet behavior changed, we went back to more of a microsite environment, giving a little bit more information to the client and still wanting her to call us. That increased the lift, and some of you might remember that in that year the internet gurus opened up a whole bunch of top-level domains where we were before restricted to .org, .com.edu. They opened up a bazillion other things, so we began to test different top-level domain extensions, and those worked extremely well. You can see from the lines that we run lots of tests that fail. Most of the tests that we run do fail. We accept failure as part of the progress at reaching more effectively the abortion-determined woman. And so when we get something that wins, it typically wins big, and that's why you see the quantum leap. This chart, by the way, resulted in an average of about 14 more abortion-determined clients contacting us every month, which means we were saving that money more babies. Those are qualified inbound calls. A qualified lead to us is a woman or a party who is related to an abortion who calls our call center and is abortion-seeking, abortion-determined. About 95% of all the calls we receive in our call center are abortion-determined calls. So the marketing has been finely tuned over the years to reach that specific, very vulnerable population. That's marketing penetration. The national average market penetration is around 3%. In Dallas, where we own and operate a clinic, we are averaging somewhere between 16 and 19% market penetration. 600% increase in market penetration in DFW, and we're not even marketing to the entire Metroplex because it's huge and we only have one clinic. In Pittsburgh, which is a smaller market, we have increased market penetration from less than 3% to an average of 36%. So a 1,300% increase in market penetration to the abortion-determined population in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania over the last several years because of this regular process of testing and optimizing marketing leads. So previously, 3 in 100 abortion-determined women were calling pregnancy centers in Pittsburgh. Today it's 2 in 5. If that doesn't get you excited, you got to check your pulse, because you begin to see the vision of stealing so much business from the abortion industry that you can begin to close their doors. Amen? Do you all say amen in D.C.? Do you? Is there any Baptists here? Don't you all say amen? Anyway, you begin to see the power of proper for-profit marketing techniques applied to the abortion-determined population. Great gains can be made to reach more women and get them to contact us. Okay. In our case, we do operate a call center, a paid call center in Dallas, 13 hours a day, 7 days a week, paid, trained call agents. All they do is take calls, chats, and texts from abortion-determined women, and their job is to convert those into kept appointments at the 35 pregnancy centers that we serve in 14 states, as well as the 7 women's care clinics that we operate in different areas across the country. Now, you might be thinking, that's great, we're getting them to call, we're persuading them to reach out to us. How effective are we at then actually bringing them into our system of compassionate care and rescuing the child? There are 2 parts to this puzzle. Market penetration is the first. Effective rate is the second. The effective rate is a statistic we invented several years ago that is actually the ultimate performance metric for a life-saving agency. And it answers the question, for every 100 qualified leads, an abortion-determined woman who contacts us, how many babies are we saving from that population? Does anybody want to take a crack at what the national average is on the effective rate? For every 100 qualified calls, people that reach the pregnancy center movement or other life-affirming agencies that choose life out of the abortion-determined population, anybody have a guess at what the effective rate is? Nobody wants to guess after the first question. 65? Anybody else? It is also 3%. 3%. The reason is because, as for reasons I already mentioned, most of the pregnancy center movement is not funded properly to reach this population. Therefore, they don't have practice in counseling this population when they see them. And so there is a dearth of training and expertise in the abortion-determined population just because we're not reaching enough of them. There is no shortage of desire. There is no shortage of passion. The 35 pregnancy centers that we serve are some of the finest in the country, and they have evolved and modified their practices to work with this population. But we still have a long way to go. This is a very difficult number to move, as you can imagine, because the abortion-determined population, which is typically coerced into having an abortion, you must address a lot of emotional, sometimes physical, spiritual needs in a very caring, compassionate, non-judgmental environment. So we'll get into phase 2 and 3, the call center, and then the actual clinics themselves on our little coalition wheel. We ran an interesting test a while back on how do we take a woman who calls us, and we tell them on the phone that we are not an abortion provider. We will not refer you for an abortion. We will not give you an abortion, but we can provide X, Y, and Z. We want you to come in and see us. It is a truthful process by which we persuade women and give them the option to come in and see us. How do we provide them an encouragement to come in? And so we began to test the idea of offering them gift cards. We discovered that in order for a woman who calls us to keep her appointment, oftentimes the means by which she opts to travel to see us has a direct impact on her seeing us. If she is going to take public transportation, the chances of her seeing us are very low. If she has a car, the chances improve. If she has to ask a friend or family member, that impacts her ability to actually come and see us. And so we said, well, how do we mitigate against those circumstances? And so we pulled out our Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and we said we're going to offer 3 different denominations of gift cards, small, medium, and large, and see if by offering her gas money, if it increases her propensity to come in and see us once she's contacted us on the phone. And in fact, $15 was too low, $35 was too much, $25 was just right. The $25 gift card resulted in a very substantial increase in appointment kept. You can see those numbers. That has since been raised to 35, which is why you see the number inflation cause that. The original test was 25. But now all categories of method of transportation are over a 50% appointment kept rate in the abortion-determined population. Now you might say, Fisher, you still are losing 50%, and that's true. But if you were to talk to any medical clinic that is working with a low-income, Medicaid-oriented population, a 50% appointment kept rate is insanely high. Insanely high, because it is very difficult to get that client to come in for any sort of medical treatment, much less talk about an unplanned pregnancy that she does not want. The gift card test has been modified several times and is continually tested, but now it is standard practice in all of our 7 women's care clinics, and in many of the pregnancy centers that we serve, they have adopted the program as well. The reason it is guaranteed more abortion-determined appointments. Guaranteed. Because it has now been tested and vetted so well. The women's care clinics themselves are a fascinating invention that we derived a few years ago. We, of course, served the pregnancy center movement. We were not seeing the increase in effective rate that we really thought we could or should, and so we began to toy with the idea of how do we solve that problem. And 2 of us went to Chick-fil-A in Atlanta, where I go to solve all my problems, and spent time with several of their executives, and we said, you know, we have made great gains in the marketing. We're reaching far more abortion-determined women, and we're getting better and better at offering them the option to contact us. Our call center is another lab. We test scripts, different tonalities of agents, male agents, female agents, agents who have had abortions, agents who haven't, all sorts of different elements there, and we're getting better and better at giving that woman the option to come in, and we're seeing more women. Once they get into a life-affirming clinic, we can't seem to influence that process. What should we do? And Chick-fil-A looked at us and said, you have to own your own clinics. And I said, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. The reason is because it's insanely expensive to own and operate medical clinics. And I obviously thought, because there's already 2,500 wonderful pregnancy centers, why in the world would we have to adopt another system? However, the data was irrefutable, and so in 2014, we did start the process of starting our own women's care clinics. By God's grace, we didn't have to. 2 existing pregnancy centers said, we want to be that. We want to be your labs, and so they, in essence, gave us their pregnancy center. So a clinic in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and a clinic in Dallas, in essence, divested their boards and transferred their assets and their client files and their staff to us, and they became divisions of Human Coalition. We now have 7 of those clinics, 4 brick and mortar, 3 mobile, and that process has worked very well. The reason is those clinics now are saving somewhere between 5 and 12 times as many babies with us than before us in the abortion-determined population. That process is difficult to move the effective rate. Even when we bring the clinic in as part of our system and they adopt our technology and they begin to work within our system, it's really quite fascinating. And of course, we look at the ultrasound as a very powerful tool, right? Do we not? When a woman sees her child in an ultrasound, that is a powerful tool. We use ultrasound in all of our clinics. We have learned over the years, however, that is not the only factor, and in fact, it may not be the primary factor in a woman's decision to abort. And this is cause for substantial study, and frankly, we're about 5% of where we need to go on this issue. But we have discovered that a woman, this is going to be a shocker to you all, makes decisions based on multiple factors, whereas a man makes a decision based on like 2. Did any of you know that? How many of you are married? Okay. Are you all aware that women make decisions based on lots of factors and men on not? With men, it's usually related to food. With women, it's usually a much more thoughtful process. Women make decisions even on something as serious as an abortion based on lots of different factors, and we began to evaluate her primary mood when she made that abortion decision. A woman's primary emotional state when she is abortion determined is anxiety. Anxiety. If an abortion determined woman changes her mind and chooses life, her primary emotion is calm. Calm. So that suggested to us that there are a number of things outside of the verbal words that are spoken or the ultrasound that can create a more calming environment in which to serve the abortion-determined woman. And so we adapted an existing model. We didn't invent this. We did adapt it, called the happiness scale. The happiness scale was proposed by a study several years ago relating to the mood of a woman who is pregnant, and we simply applied it to the abortion-determined population. The happiness scale suggests that a woman who is abortion-determined is typically going to be a 1. She is very not happy. If she is super happy about her pregnancy, she is a 5. So on a scale of 1 to 5, where is she on that happiness scale? 60% of Human Coalition clients are a 1 when they walk in the door, which is an extraordinarily difficult client. That means that if we are unable to move her from a 1 to anything else, we have a good shot at losing the child and the client. However, if we are able to help her move just 1 step up the food chain, from a 1 to a 2, her chances of choosing life go up 77%. Meaning if she is not so depressed and disappointed, but at least has some hope, there is an excellent chance that she will move into a life-choosing frame of mind as long as we continue to support her and provide her with tangible care. Well, this opened up an entirely different set of variables that we hadn't considered before, and one of the ones that we've been testing is a study called atmospherics. Atmospherics is the study of non-verbal influences on our decision-making. So this happens to me every time I walk into Best Buy. I walk into Best Buy, clean lighting, blue and yellow colors, all my favorite movies and products laid out. I inevitably spend more money in Best Buy than what I had originally intended. I have been victimized by atmospherics, okay? Do any of you relate to that? Am I the only one that's victimized? Okay. So certain stores, certain services, Apple products, have that effect on me, and they inevitably get me to spend money because of the atmospherics or the brand. And so we began to study how is it possible to create a very specifically designed calming environment in our women's care clinics that can help move a client from anxiety to calm. And so we invented what we now jokingly refer to as the Blue Room test. The Blue Room test, we took 2 counseling rooms in our clinic in Dallas, which were equal, and they're very nicely decorated, very nicely furnished, and we left one alone, and the other one we adapted. We painted the walls blue, which is a common color. We changed the furniture. We got rid of the crummy fluorescent lighting. We changed throw pillows, and we set up the room in a very specific way based on other medical studies that suggested a very calming environment. We ran the same counselors, the same nurses, the same trained staff with the same counseling practices in both rooms, and then studied the life decision rate of those women and to see whether or not the Blue Room had a material test on her life decision, and the Blue Room returned a 36% lift in life decision rate. Now again, most of our tests fail, but this one was a booyah. In our world, if we get a 1% lift, it's like a party. If you get a 36% lift, it's like a big party. It's like New Year's Eve. So guess what color all of our counseling rooms are? They're all blue in all of our clinics. Okay, and we are now just beginning to get the tip of the iceberg on this process, understanding how atmospherics influences the woman. The ultrasound is critical. I don't want to minimize that. But the counselor, the relationship with the staff, the ability to establish trust, and the environment itself all play critical roles in serving that woman well so that we give her every opportunity to choose life through that process. Yes?
Brian, are you actually administering that happiness test on all of the women who come in?
It's done through a survey process. It's an entry and an exit study that relate to her happiness. We ask her on a scale of 1 to 5, how happy are you about the pregnancy? We ask her when she comes in, and we ask her when she leaves. It doesn't happen on every woman. It's a sample because this is in beta testing right now. But yes, on a large enough population to where we have statistically valid information. I'll just touch briefly on the continuum of care, and then I'll finish up and answer any questions you might have. We beta tested this program in Pittsburgh last year. This program is designed to meet the needs of the abortion-determined woman once the crisis is over. How many of you have ever heard the criticism about the pro-life movement that we only care about the baby? Nobody? Okay, 3 of you. First of all, it's virtually untrue. Secondly, I wouldn't necessarily argue that. It is 60 million babies who have been killed, and so the fact that our care and concern is for the child is self-evident, and I make no apology for that. However, caring for the mother and the family is, I think, incumbent on rescuing the child. And so we have adapted the continuum of care. It's a very efficient way of providing care. Pittsburgh is a perfect example. In Pittsburgh, we vetted other organizations in Pittsburgh that already exist that provide fantastic care in 12 separate areas, such as maternity housing, drug and alcohol abuse counseling, job placement, job training, financial assistance, health care, adoption services. And we basically picked the best of breed, and then we did hire staff in the women's care clinic, not to provide all that care, because we can't possibly do it well, but to quarterback the care. And so when a client opts into the continuum of care program, they are now given their own personal coach, and that coach designs for them a custom care solution that then is monitored and handled through our women's care process. The program works so well in Pittsburgh that we then expanded it into Dallas. It is becoming a permanent part of all of our women's care clinic solutions across the country. It's a very, very powerful solution that now, very interestingly, is being tested all the way upstream into the call center. Because now the call center doesn't have to just say, we can offer you a free ultrasound. We can ask the question, ma'am, what is your primary reason for wanting to abort your child? My boyfriend is threatening me and he beats me. If we can help you, if we can rescue you from that situation and provide you housing and support, will you come in and see us? Do you see how powerful that is? To test that now into the call center as a mechanism by which we can bring them into care. So very interesting. This shows you some demographic breakdown of a continuum of care client in Pittsburgh and in Dallas, where we've just started the program. And look at these numbers. 13% in Pittsburgh, substance abuse. 1/5 have criminal records. The abortion-determined population very often is dealing with criminal history. 67% are mothers of other children. 85% in the continuum of care program in Pittsburgh are without a husband. 77% technically below the poverty line, 46% African American. Primarily minority-driven, low-income, abandoned women are the ones that most need our help and are entering the continuum of care program. The power of this program long-term, I don't think we've been able to estimate properly. Here are some of the services that we're providing. This gives you a sense of what women that are abortion-determined really need. 69% employment services, 68% financial assistance, 63% need housing. We had a woman last week that came into our clinic who was living out of her car. Pregnant, living. She had a job, but because of her family situation, had no home. And we were able to provide her with temporary housing, healthcare services, childcare, all the way down to adoption services. That gives you a basic idea of the type of client that we're working with. Why am I going through all this? I want to instill a sense of hope and optimism with you, that you understand that abortion can and will be ended in America in our lifetimes. It will be a collaborative effort between the legislative, political efforts, the fantastic educational efforts that many organizations are involved with, and community engagement with the abortion-determined population, which is where Human Coalition spends the vast majority of its time. As we continue to make awesome gains in state and federal legislators, as we continue to have phenomenal videos like CMP and Live Action have released, distill and get disseminated into the culture, and as we continue to, frankly, steal far more clients from the abortion industry and get far more adept at rescuing children and providing long-term care for women, we will, in fact, see abortion become unthinkable and unavailable in America. What questions do you have? Yes, sir.
I had a quick question. You gave the two percentages.
We have a microphone coming out.
Sorry, Vince from CareNet. I was actually the one that guessed the 1% on the first one, which I totally believe that. The second one, the 3%, I'm just curious as to how you guys calculated the 3% on the second one in terms of the conversion of when an abortion determined person comes into contact with the clinic or whatever it is, and only 3% of them end up choosing life. Is that so? I'm curious because I think based on the calculations that we've done and the data that we have, it's a lot higher than that. So I'm just curious as to how you guys came up with 3%.
We work with 80-some pregnancy centers over the past 5 years that represent a pretty broad cross-section of different center styles in different states. And the data is actually derived from qualified leads that we send them versus their conversion rates. So it's actually event-level data. Event-level data. It's data that's collected by us at the direct relationships with pregnancy centers. Yep. The life decision rates are far higher, obviously, for different categories of clients, and likely to carry obviously is close to 100%. An abortion vulnerable woman or a legitimately undecided woman, those life decision rates are going to be substantially higher. And keep in mind that in the clinics that we own and operate, we're averaging somewhere between 14 and 19% effective rate. So this is our only focus. We've moved the needle 600 or 800%, which is excellent. But the highest we've ever seen is around 22, 23% in this population because they're just extremely difficult to work with. It's a great question. Other questions?
Hi, I'm trying to figure out, to go back to something you said about the model where you ended up taking ownership of clinics and that you have a higher rate of effectiveness. Is that true?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what is the purpose of, I mean, is it possible for other clinics not owned by you to sort of pick up on what you're doing? Or, I mean, or is it, you're going to take over the entire pregnancy, you're going to own every one of them or something, or you're just telling us what they're doing in advance? I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, what can CareNet do in these sorts of folks? That's why I was kind of...
Well, we function in both movements. We serve the pregnancy center movement while we are, in essence, building a separate movement that's focused solely on the abortion-determined client. So our desire is to see the pregnancy center movement become extraordinarily adept at reaching and serving the abortion-determined client. Frankly, that would be the cheapest solution, right? Because those infrastructures already exist. While we serve the movement and attempt to train and teach them, and we're a very open book, those 35 centers represent a broad cross-section of centers in 14 different states, and we're continually adding pregnancy centers that want to do this work. We are also growing the number of women's care clinics that we operate because we're not sure the pregnancy center movement, because of the way it's physically constructed, is able to make what are revolutionary changes to adapt itself to the abortion-determined clientele. So we function in both arenas, hoping that both are successful, and that process so far has worked out quite well. Does that answer your question?
But you don't have anyone sort of affiliating with you. In other words, pregnancy centers who could come and take courses from, it's sort of work with you or become an affiliate of yours in some way.
Well, those 35, that's exactly what those 35 pregnancy centers do. We don't use the term affiliate because we're not an affiliate organization. We're a solutions provider, but they are partnering with us. We provide them abortion-determined leads and call center support services, and then we also provide all the training and the background that we're collecting through our women's care clinics. We make that available to anybody. I mean, if any pregnancy center wants to be able to learn.
That's what I'm getting at. So if somebody watching this.
Yeah, CareNet's been down. Their call center folks were down and studied our call center methodology, and we have pregnancy centers come through all the time that just want to learn what we're doing. They don't have to be in relationship with us to have that information because we want to save babies. So however it gets done is good with us.
To that point, Ryan, I would wonder if you could comment on even the strategy. I know that you don't just go to any city around the country, but Human Coalition has kind of strategically targeted certain cities, and if you could explain why that is.
Yeah, Human Coalition is targeting the 40 most abortion-dense cities in the country. All of our women's care clinics are in a subset of that population, and most of the pregnancy centers that we serve are in one or more of those abortion-dense cities. It is not that we devalue a baby in some other city. It is from an efficiency standpoint. We generate the most abortion-determined leads, and we can save the most children when we are in the most abortion-dense populations. And it's not always just, are you near a metro area? It's we have mapped the entire country. We know which zip codes are most abortion-dense, and we'd like pregnancy centers and locations that are stuck in the middle of the most abortion-dense zip codes of the most abortion-dense cities. And so it is a very forgive me, business-minded plan that we've developed, because most of us are from the business world, to tackle this problem, to be able to save the most babies the fastest. That requires us to be in cities and locations that are abortion dense.
What about the Planned Parenthood and other women's clinic advertisements online? Is there a way to link directly to those and have your paid ads pop up, or does that not make sense?
Well, I'm sure I understand it's a competitive environment. So if a city has, Atlanta, we just opened up a clinic in Atlanta. Atlanta, to the best of our knowledge, has 13 abortion providers. It's a top 10 abortion dense city in the country. It is heavily competitive. So when we are marketing in Atlanta, we are coming up against all sorts of abortion providers that are looking to get to the same client. And so our costs to market in Atlanta are substantially higher than cities where there's either less abortion clinics, or the abortion clinics don't bother to market because they don't have to. So because of the way that, and this is primarily true for internet marketing, but can be true for offline marketing as well, it has everything to do with budget and marketing intelligence. Can we outspend them, or can we outsmart them, both through traditional marketing and online marketing? Did that answer your question? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have online resources for pregnancy resource centers that want to get training, or are there meetings or conferences for PRCs and women or men who counsel outside of abortion facilities?
That's a great question. We provide that either in person or on the phone. We don't do online resources just because the interaction is necessary for that process. But if a pregnancy center or a collection of pregnancy centers wants to learn and understand this methodology and determine how to apply it in their world, they just work through our client services department. We have a staff that's all they do is work with pregnancy centers on these types of issues, and then we'll set up training for them. It's a great question. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I was just wondering, I might have gotten this wrong, but is there a business aspect to it? And in the long term, how does the business model work to make it more sustainable and expand more? Maybe I got this completely wrong, but like more of the Planned Parenthood version of supporting actually pro-life, saving babies, like more of a system there, or a business word?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So we're a C3, like I imagine all of you, so we're a nonprofit, which means in our case we are 100% funded by private donations. We have a bevy of donors like you all do. We offer our services free to the client, so there is no for-profit model to be appended in the traditional sense. That's part of our commitment to our clientele. As you can see from our continuum of care clients, they couldn't afford it even if we did charge some sort of nominal fee. So the question of funding is, to me, really interesting and something that we've studied. I think most of you know the entire pro-life movement is woefully underfunded. It's about $700 million a year, and that $700 million is scattered to 4,000 groups. So you have an extraordinarily grassroots, low-budget, underfunded movement. Planned Parenthood, by contrast, one organization, $1.2 billion. So one abortion organization is almost twice the size of the entire pro-life movement. I would love, because I'm a business guy, I've been desperately trying to find some model where there's a profit to be made somewhere so that we could fund this outside of private donations. I have not found that yet. There are certainly some interesting ideas about having ancillary for-profit organizations that spin off profits and whatnot. Those are, interesting, but not short-term. My personal opinion is the way to get the pro-life movement funded properly is to awaken the church. The pro-life ethic is grounded in the Christian worldview. You can be pro-life and not a Christian, but ultimately it's grounded in a Christian worldview. And the church, in my view, has an extraordinary obligation to lead this, Catholic or Protestant, and fund it. And the reality is $700 million is a pittance. That's throwaway change for American giving. I think American giving in 2015 was in $300 billion and some dollars, and pro-life was 0.2%. 0.2% of all American giving went to ending the worst Holocaust in American history. So the way to solve that is for us to be deeply engaged with churches, winsomely, compassionately, sometimes candidly, urging them to move along and putting this at the very, very, very top of the list of their priorities, because it certainly is at the very top of God's priorities. It should be in ours. It's a great question. And as a business guy, trust me, I resonate with you, and we have yet to find a solution that is not donor-related. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Irina.
How does, do you also study the model of Planned Parenthood, given that they have great branding, marketing, that they make their centers very comfortable, and even some of the newer non-Planned Parenthood abortion facilities try to make it like a spa? So could you talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there are a few steps ahead of the movement in total in terms of what is appealing and attractive to the abortion-determined population. So yes, we do. We also rely on other studies. FRC, CLI, other organizations have done some phenomenal research and work for us, and so frankly, we lean heavily on you all for a lot of the information that we get so that we're not duplicating the wheel. They are going after a very specific product and a very specific service. The challenge for those of us in the life movement is we are trying to work with a population who does not want what we offer. They want something that we refuse to offer. And so our model has to be tweaked and engineered a little bit differently. The abortion industry typically has had both the government and certainly the media on its side, so they control the branding, they control the research. Their research department is $18 million, twice the size of the largest pro-life group. And so we have to recognize the resources that they have available to them and on much slimmer budgets try to figure out how to outwit them. Certainly studying their model is part of that, and we do that, but also being innovative and inventive and doing everything possible to get one step ahead. Because the nice thing about being 1.2 billion is you're also mercifully slow. And when you're small, you're nimble. Yes, ma'am?
Are you averse to some of the Planned Parenthood money from the government coming to Human Coalition?
It would give me great pleasure to take some of those dollars and save babies instead of killing them. No, I'm not adverse at all.
Could you speak about how your data, your presentation that you've given today is being used by the very people who will be making the decisions about defunding Planned Parenthood or building a stronger model to serve abortion-determined women?
Sure. We've just recently begun to spend any time up here. We're not a political organization. We're not an advocacy organization. We are a community engagement organization. Our job is to save babies on the ground in major cities. And so since our inception, we've done virtually nothing politically. On November 9th, I woke up a little bit confused as to what had just happened and tried to figure out how we might be able to serve an administration which purported to be much different than the previous. And so we spun up a little team here under Dean Nelson's leadership and have been spending time with different elected officials and agencies, not on legislation, because that's not an area we understand, but on how can our data and our experience with the 1.2 million abortion-determined population serve policymakers. And because that data set is unique, we have very substantial internet data, call center data, and clinic data. At the macro level, there has been very substantial interest in understanding the motivations, the behaviors, the life circumstances of the abortion-determined population, which I would argue is the most vulnerable population in our country, and their babies, obviously, and how to serve them better. So we have gotten, frankly, a very warm reception from the officials and the agencies that we've talked to, and there is a deep interest in us providing macro data that could inform their policy and helping them understand what drives a woman to an abortion decision, and more importantly, what can be done to have them choose life. And so we'll see how that goes, but we are the freshest of freshmen when it comes to political engagement, and I can't imagine the mistakes I'm making along the way, as much as we're trying to avoid the dumb tax. I think I'm out of time. Irina, thanks so much for inviting me here today, and thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Brian and the Human Coalition. If you are interested in getting more information, please visit Human Coalition online. You can find us at Family Research Council on Facebook, so please like us if you already aren't part of our group, and at FRCDC on Twitter. And for future events, please go to frc.org/events. Thank you for joining us today and help us to bring these abortion-determined women to the centers so that they can choose life. Thank you.